So I'm Pat Imeson. I think we're good to go here. Chris just tapped to move forward through it. So before we get started, we'll be zooming on some remote guys, hopefully, if they can get up and operational here. If not, you're stuck with me. Just a second before we get into what we're talking about here, I want to explain a little bit about Black Diamond, who we are, and what we're doing with PharmaLect and partners. Gotcha? Okay. So basically, we're a private equity venture capital group here in Colorado. We started about in 2000 now, so we're in about our 20th year. For some of the guys who know us out here, we seem to be long-term patient investors, sometimes a little longer and more patient than we'd like to be. But you know, one of the successful exits that we've had here in the last couple of years was a company in the life science sector where we made really a first investment in a really innovative high throughput genetic testing company that we started at ground zero, took it all the way through an operating business and sold it in 2018 for about $60 million. So one of our more successful exits, and it was through that, through our background there that we really met Dr. Shake, Mike Shake and Dr. Platt. And about 90 days ago, maybe a little more than that, 120 days ago, we got a call from Mike, said that the science that Dr. Platt was working on, it basically thought it had efficacy for COVID-19. So this came about after reviewing the RNA map. So what we did is we formed PharmaLect and Partners as a special purpose vehicle to basically fund the clinical trial process for the drug called Prolectin. So when you think about the big problem here today, can I move that a little bit? You know, is basically, this has been updated, although the date doesn't show it as today. We've had about 51.5 million people infected in the world with COVID-19, out of which there's been about 1.2 million deaths, going on 1.3. Currently, there's about 14 million people infected in the world, of which 94,360 of those people today are in ICU or in critical care. So one of the things I've watched since we started doing these webinars about 60 days ago is the number of severe patients was really stable for quite a while. And what's happened recently here is that's ticked up by about 30,000 people. So the economic cost to the US is about 30% of our GDP. To date, there's no vaccine, no approved treatment. You know, we know that Pfizer announced that they seem to be tracking the right ways, but that's still a ways off. And there's quite a few issues with vaccines in terms of storage and distribution and a lot of other things that need to take place. So basically, there's no approved treatment today. So once again, if you go to these statistics, these are the world statistics. You can kind of see what's happening here in terms of after the initial bump, where we are today, seeing another spike in cases. You're also seeing, you know, we kind of hit this really high point with deaths back in March, in April, stabilized, oscillated back and forth. And now we seem to be upticking again here in terms of where we are today. In the US, you see the trend line also. These are cases that we're dealing with today. The good news here is we seem to be learning a bit more about how to treat the disease, and we're seeing deaths somewhat stable. But we should remember that the deaths are actually a following indicator from people that are infected. So, you know, we could still see an uptick here. So when we formed PharmaLect and Partners, basically it's a special purpose vehicle. Our sole mission here is to fund the approval process. We're not investing money in R&D, not investing money in corporate overheads or laboratories or other things. We're investing our funds in basically the clinical trial process. So we've earned a 50% joint venture interest in PharmaLectin. That interest is to the indications of influenza and coronavirus, any coronaviruses. In addition to that, we have a security interest in cancer metastasis, where Prolectin's already gone through phase 2 trials for cancer metastasis. It's basically a phase 2 drug. So if we failed for some reason on what we're trying to do here on the Prolectin side for COVID or influenza, we've got a backup. It's not a binary equation for us. So how do we get there? I know a lot of people's $5 million doesn't seem like a lot of money to go through clinical trials at this point. But basically what we've done is we've repurposed about $200 million that's been previously spent by Dr. Platt on R&D and R&D activities. In addition, we've got 35 years of his experience. And between the money and the experience, it's basically allowed us to leapfrog phase 1, phase 2, and move straight into phase 3 trials. So when you think about the market opportunity here, COVID-19 estimated market size, in addition to the humanitarian aspect here, COVID-19 is about a $20 billion market size, as near as they can figure out today. Influenza is about 1 billion people, about a $6 billion market. These other indications that we think we can have efficacy in are not part of our joint venture relationship, but they're still important to us because of the warrant position we have and conversion rights, and obviously the security interest we have in cancer metastasis. So when we started this process, which we're now in the second 8-week period of this or so, originally we set this up in stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 investments, where we had off ramps so that if we could mitigate our risk, if we saw something that wasn't working, we could get off of it. Where we actually are today is we've moved very, very quickly here over the last 8 weeks, where we actually have completed a proof of concept trial in India with an initial small subset, 10 people. This is on the tablet form of the drug. We actually have several different forms, tablet, IV. On the tablet form, the results we had back were pretty amazing. This is 2 weeks ago. Basically, 60% of the patients that were in that trial on day 2, 24 hours after taking the drug, tablet form, chewable tablet basically, had totally eliminated the viral load. 100% of those patients, the active patients, were eliminated by day 4. The other thing that was really interesting that we got out of that trial is on day 14, the immunoglobulin G, which is the antibody speaking to immunization, was actually at very high elevated levels. So don't have a proof of this yet, other than what we're seeing anecdotally from those patients. It wasn't part of the trial, but we are seeing a very high elevated level. So basically these stages that we're talking about here is kind of smushed together, where we have gone through everything we needed to do to get to clinical trials, and we actually are now approved based upon the results that we just had in India for a 400 patient trial. By the way, these trials are all conforming with FDA protocols. So these results are posted on the FDA government site. And that's on the tablet form of the drug. It's also led to approval of the IV form. And that's specific. Once again, small test on the IV form, but it's for patients who are in ARDS. So these are people who are having acute respiratory disease syndrome, where COVID has advanced to the point where basically they're intubated. So we expect that trial to take place in 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. We're manufacturing the vials for that trial now, and expectation is that we will actually be saving lives here in the next 4 to 5 weeks. So pretty exciting times for what we're going on here. The way we structured our investment around this, we're not supposed to speak too much about this at this point, so if you can take a snapshot or whatever is on the screen, but because it's in the deck. But basically, we're raising a series of 5 million, 2.5 million in a Series A round that ends up owning 50% of PharmaLect and Partners. We come back with a Series B round, which is actually to finish the clinical trials. Those clinical trials, Series B will have a 25% interest in PharmaLect and Partners. So when you think about the valuation here, the pre-money valuation we're working off now is $2.5 million. In Series A, Series B, the pre-money valuation 7.5, and the only thing I'd say is for a phase 2, phase 3 clinical trial drug, those valuations are ridiculous. I mean, it's very ridiculous. But part of that is the urgency of the situation that's in front of us, keeping our capital inflows ahead of the speed at which Dr. Platt's been moving. So once again, we're a 50% joint venture partner. Our partner on the other side is Dr. Platt, Vioxitran. PharmaLect and Partners is the entity that we manage here. The joint venture is PharmaLect Inc. So now, I think we've got Mike. And Michael, hit the sign side.
Pat, how you doing? Hey, Chris.
How are you?
Good. I just need to be able to share my screen.
Yeah, we'll get there in 2 seconds. All right, you should be able to go now.
Awesome. My screen shared.
You're on there, Mike. See your face, though.
We see you, but not the screen.
There you go.
There you go. That should do it. Now you're talking.
All right. Well, Pat, thank you for that great overview. I want to thank Dave for letting me present here, and I do want to say something to kind of start off. You know, while I'm going to give this presentation, 250 people are probably going to die from COVID. I mean, I just want to set the stage. This is a really big deal. So if there was a therapeutic that would reduce the viral load, perhaps even eliminate it, make you feel better, how about stop you from giving it to your friends and family? And what about giving you the ability to basically self-vaccinate yourself, basically be immune in about 14 days? I'd say that as a good human being, you want to get behind that. So the question isn't whether or not you want to do this deal. The question is, does it work? How soon can we get it? This is amazing stuff. And bottom line, what's my risk? So in this presentation, we're going to kind of cover these things. I can't wait till we get to the does it work part. Now, we're really excited about that. So we're going to start off here with the overview. There is no vaccine. You might have heard in the news about Pfizer, but right now there's nothing yet. They are targeting 40 to 60% effectiveness. Pfizer thinks it's a little bit high. It's the game's too early to tell. Our death rate is unacceptably high. What is unacceptably high? What we're doing is we are comparing influenza to coronavirus, because influenza we have deemed an acceptable level. We're trying to get to that. Right now, the death rate's around 6 times that, if I put on my analyst hat. The other thing that happens is you end up getting fibrotic damage to your lungs and organs. And there's no effective treatment from early to late stage. We believe we have the full gambit with respect to therapeutic. Now, these numbers here are just amazing. 9.5 million cases, $50 billion was spent on this. Can we do this better? That's the real essence of this. Now, there's a bunch of therapeutic options out there. This is a true number, 3,787 clinical trials for coronavirus. So the question that you as an investor have to ask, why us? What makes us this one shining gem out of 3,787 clinical trials? I'm going to tell you that point. So what happens here is, let me get my little sharing tool out. Well, actually, I don't see it here. What happens here is you have an immunomodulatory trial. These are buckets. You have a vaccine trial, you have regenerative medicine, oxygenation, antiretrovirals. We're different. We're an oral or an IV polysaccharide. So there's 2 different ways that you can take it. But it's not a vaccine, it's not an antiretroviral, it's just it's a mishmash of a bunch of things. And that's what we'll get to in a second. How does this thing work? So in order to explain how this works, I've got to give you a very quick overview of the virus itself and how we get it. So what happens is you start with this little virus here. There's these receptors on the cell, it enters, and the cells are infected. And when that happens, you create these things called antibodies. These are the Y-shaped things right over here. And the Y-shaped things, what they do is they tag these little spike proteins. And when they tag the spike proteins, it is recognized by this phagocyte over here, which is basically a white blood cell, your immune system. And you'll see there is no viral entry. Okay, so that's how it works. So antibodies tag the virus for destruction by the phagocyte. That's what we do. There's another mechanism, but we can say that's for the Q&A. What we do is we have a carbohydrate, and these carbohydrates as galectin inhibitors, as a class of drugs, are non-toxic. What they do is they gunk up on the spike proteins, just like the antibodies did. And what they do is they prevent entry into the cell. They're coursing through your bloodstream neutralized, and you've probably heard of that, neutralizing antibodies, but these are galectin inhibitors. And what ends up happening is, in theory, sorry about that, in theory, what happens is the liver will see the carbohydrate that it's attached to and eliminate it from the liver. And that's the mechanism of action. R&D. So when Pat had talked about the amount of money that we put into this, we didn't just like pull this thing off the shelf. A lot of money went into the research behind this and being able to develop carbohydrates drugs. This is a repurposing of an existing cancer therapeutic that was in phase 3 development. And here we are repurposing it for coronavirus. So we'll be able, so based off of that, we'll be able to have IP. We're going to do, we're in the manufacturing process, and we hope to also have a phase 3 IND coming very soon. With reference to peer-reviewed articles in journals, here we go. There's a little, I think there's around 9 here. There's probably, the list is growing, but each one of these, or quite a few of them, what these articles sense is, or what the bottom line is, they think that galectin inhibitors can be used to block the spike protein, get filtered out by the liver, and also elicit an immunomodulatory response. Because remember, we work in the entire spectrum. Now, why haven't you heard of galectin inhibitors? Why haven't you heard of these therapeutics coming to fruition? And why haven't you heard of one therapeutic that's from small biotech? And I'm going to explain that. It's right over here. And it relates to, this is a great article, by the way, Can We Trust Big Pharma? $10 billion was spent on Operation Warp Speed, and most of it is going toward vaccines, promising vaccines. And all of it, and I use that word loosely, almost all of it, is directed toward Big Pharma. So Big Pharma has basically shut us out, meaning small biotech, out of the game. And that's why you haven't heard of it. You haven't heard on CNBC or any of these major media outlets mentioning any small biotechs. Think of one, not even one. Moderna doesn't count, because you've heard of that. So now let's talk to our end-to-end solution. So we're going to start off here. With, we have an oral version, and that's going to be used in stage 1. And then we have intravenous versions that are going to be used in stage 2, 3, or what's called long haulers disease. Long haulers is when you get that tiredness, that fogginess of the brain. You're kind of bumping into things, and that's a real element of this disease. But we're not going to talk about that. What I'm going to do here is take you through the viral load and kind of show you where we fit in the whole stage of things. So the viral load is denoted by this gray line here, and it goes up and it hits a peak. Then we circled it, and you feel symptomatic right in this area, and then it goes down. And what's supposed to happen is it's supposed to go down right like this, all the way down, and you're better by day 7 or maybe day 10. Well, what happens is if you continue with the symptoms, the virus is no longer the issue. It's your inflammatory response that's the issue. And that's when you'll see the viral load goes down. So what I want to say to you is there's a lot of companies pursuing a viral response, and so are we. But there's also the hyperinflammatory response that you have to tackle. And what's happening is all these drugs are failing. And the reason why they're failing is because they're testing viral things that affect the viral load in this stage 3 hyperinflammatory state. Number one, that doesn't make sense. And that's why a lot of these things are failing. And I wanted to point that out to you. Remdesivir is a viral inhibitor, and they use it in the ARDS stage of disease. It doesn't make sense, which is why a lot of doctors aren't using it. I'm not going to go off too much on that, but hopefully what I want everyone to understand is there were 3,700, right? This is where they're all focused on. So we're doing something different because we're also operating in this stage of the disease, the hyperinflammatory stage. This is why we're excited about this. We are currently in clinical trials, yay! Everyone wants to know how the results are. Well, we have a peer-reviewed journal article coming out, hopefully in a couple weeks. We're really super excited about it. Our goal was to reduce the disease, okay? Now I'm gonna give you some subjective things here. Our hope is to eliminate the disease, okay? This is where we're hoping. This is where I think the number is gonna be. So with that in mind, there's no side effects to, we didn't have any severe, or I can't say that yet. We don't expect any severe adverse events with this either. So again, we're reducing the viral load. We hope to have people recovered in around 5 days or less. And we're applying for application in India and the United States. That's where we're at in the clinical trial.
Hey, Mike, you got 2 minutes, okay?
Thank you. We got a great team. You got Dr. Platt. He's got 4 public companies, created shareholder value. And then we got a bunch of great medical advisors. So we're very comfortable with our team. I'm going to go back 1 slide here. This started in August and we're done. Okay, so that should give you a sense of what we're capable of doing in a very condensed time frame. So we're not spending money in R&D, we're spending money on clinical development. Our goal is to license it. How much money do we need? We need 5 million. Most of the money that we spent right now is right here in the manufacturing. And then we have the rest of the money is on clinical trials. For value proposition, we compare ourselves to Galecto Bio. The symbol is GLTO. They're a $400 million market valuation right now, just IPO'd. We are at a higher phase of clinical development than them. And I think we're going out at a $5 million market cap. We're a steal. That's the bottom line. And this is pretty much the end of my presentation. I do have a mechanism of action slide that some of you may want to ask some questions on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Pat. Where'd Pat go? Pat. Pat will be around if you have questions. There is kind of an interesting twist on the transaction that you can talk to him about just in terms of size and whatnot, which is kind of unique. But Mike, thank you for that. I think that we're done. So I just want to, what's that?
I have a question.
What's that?
Is he still on?
Are you still on, Mike?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want me to sign off or?
No. We have a question for you.
Okay.
I have an answer then.
Okay. I don't want anybody to think I know anything about this because I don't. But lectins in food create inflammation in the body. So how does this treatment, how does it coincide with the lectins that are created, or the lectins that are produced through food in the body, which causes inflammation? This obviously is treating COVID-19 is an inflammatory disease that attacks the lungs. Is that right?
Yes, it's an inflammatory disease.
Okay, so the name of this company is PharmaLect. So what does it having to do with the lectins that are created in the body that create inflammation in the body? Does it have anything to do with that?
What you're probably referring to are galectins. Those are they're basically, they bind to, or they have an affinity for glucose. So what ends up happening is galectins are elevated in this disease. There are some journal articles. I'm not sure if it was on my list, but you can Google it, of course, or I could send it. I could find it. But what we've seen is in some peer-reviewed articles is that galectins are elevated in coronavirus. We actually believe that we very much believe that you could use galectin-3 serum test to predict whether or not someone's going to have a bad response to coronavirus. So I don't know if that answers your question, but the question is, are they upregulated in the disease? Absolutely. So if you block something that's upregulated, you expect to have an impact on it. And we expect that to happen on the immune modulatory side of the disease.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Wonderful.
Appreciate it.